In this video, I'm going to be taking another look at Dr. Fazale Rana, Reasons to Believe Ministries, and what they teach on human origins. I did some videos last month on both Dr. Ross and Dr. Rana, and some people said I was using really old material that they had. To be fair, the video by Fuz Rana was uploaded to their YouTube channel about 5 years ago, and I'm not sure how old the Hugh Ross material was. So now we're going to take a look at some of their most recent claims.
10 years ago, Hugh Ross and I developed a radical approach to the question of human origins by proposing a testable creation model, advancing the idea that there is scientific credibility to the biblical account of human origins. And that work led to a book called Who Was Adam? 10 years later, Hugh and I reevaluate our model in light of the latest scientific discoveries. Where does the model hold firm? Where does the model need to be refined? That reassessment is found in an updated edition to the book, Who Was Adam? It is our hope that the question, who was Adam, will invite Christians and non-believers alike into a conversation and prompt a deeper question, who was Adam's creator?
So I purchased the book, I found some new Fuz Rana videos, and let's take a look and see if their creation model really is scientifically testable. This is from May 20th, 2018 on the Reasons to Believe YouTube channel.
Hello, Jeff Zwaring here again with Give and Take, where we look at those challenging and intriguing scientific ideas and help you be equipped to use them to share the gospel. Today I'm joined with Fuz Rana and Ken Samples, and we're going to look into a challenging and intriguing question. Did humans and Neanderthals actually interbreed?
Well, he doesn't look too thrilled about it, and it makes him look a little worried.
Fuz, Ken, good to have you here today.
Hi, Jeff.
You know, this seems like just a non-starter. I mean, how could this possibly be? So why are we even talking about this on the show today?
Yeah, well, I mean, whether we like it or not, it's become orthodoxy among anthropologists to think that when humans began to migrate around the world, we encountered Neanderthals and these mysterious creatures that are called the Denisovans. And the belief is that we actually interbred, though to a limited degree, but interbred with some of these creatures. And in fact, it looks as if their genetic material is actually imprinted in the human genome. Most people, if you're not from African ancestry, may have somewhere between 1% to 4% Neanderthal DNA in your genome.
Genome.
Sorry, maybe I'm wrong, but I just never hear it pronounced that way, so it kind of was bothering me. The other thing that bothers me is when they call Homo sapiens human, but they don't refer to Neanderthals as human. They were every bit as human as we are, just not Homo sapiens, not the same species of human. He mentioned that people from outside of Africa will have 1% to 4% Neanderthal DNA, which is correct. People from Asia will also have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. We're also finding another admixture with Denisovan-like early archaic humans in Southeast Asia.
So this is more than just kind of a passing event or something. It's something that seems to have actually changed the human genome, if you will, or been introduced into the human gene pool.
That's exactly right. Now, I'll say this, that the evidence in favor of this is, I think, largely compelling, but there's still a number of outstanding questions that personally, for me, trouble me from a scientific standpoint. So I'm not completely convinced that the interbreeding happened, but there's good evidence that would make it reasonable for someone to draw that conclusion.
I think one of the reasons it's so hard for Dr. Rana to accept this new information is it goes completely against what he was teaching before. This is what he said in 2004. Despite compelling evidence, a minority of paleoanthropologists still believe that Neanderthals made a genetic contribution to modern humans through interbreeding. If Neanderthals interbred with modern humans, then by definition, they must be human. And remember, his definition of human is more or less equal to us.
So if I were to put you on the spot, you know, say somewhere between 0 and 100%, where would you put yourself?
Probably in the 80 to 85% range in terms of certainty that interbreeding happened.
You see what he's doing there? He's leaving the door open for just a little bit of doubt in case he might be wrong. But we have extensive genetic testing, thousands of genomes from all over the world, and it's no longer speculation.
But again, there are still some questions that don't quite sit comfortably with me. One of them would be that humans and Neanderthals developed very differently from infanthood to adulthood.
There was a study that came out back in 2012, and some articles, some headlines kind of seemed to support what he's saying. Others said exactly the opposite. If you go to the original study, you can see that they say most elements fell within the expected range of modern humans.
And our brain structures were different as well. And you wonder if that difference in developmental trajectories could actually make it difficult or impossible for interbreeding to take place. But again, if we're going to go with scientific consensus, we have to say that the interbreeding happened.
Now remember, they are claiming scientific credibility to biblical origins and also that it's testable. We know which specific genes were inherited from Neanderthals, what the percentages are throughout the population, and whether they were good or bad.
You know, I find that interesting that there's, some level of certainty, but there's some challenges. And obviously that, from a naturalist perspective, that seems like, oh yeah, clearly we're just the same types of creatures. I'm encouraged to hear that there is some reason for skepticism.
Well, they're not the same as us. They are slightly different from us in many different ways, and these differences evolved after our split with our common ancestor in response to the colder climate.
But Ken, I'm going to throw it over to you because this raises some challenging theological questions. I mean, let's just say this is true. What do we do with that? How does that play out?
Well, I think the issue that almost comes up naturally is, what if there is a child conceived, and what is the nature of that child? How do we think about the soul of the child? And there are these theological debates about how our soul is given. Does God create it directly, or is it like the body, it comes from the parents? So it raises these challenging and questions as to how to think about those kinds of things.
Well, it is a problem if you believe in a soul, but it certainly isn't a problem for science. We have solid evidence that we did interbreed and produce offspring with Neanderthals. They're not going to find any scientific evidence to back up this part of their model either.
So kind of stepping back for just a second, given the idea that Neanderthals and humanity might have coupled, bred, whatever the term we want to use for it, from a biblical perspective, does that trouble you?
Well, I mean, there is obviously bestiality, and those kinds of things are talked about in the Bible. And
see, that's ridiculous. Since they don't consider Neanderthals human, they have to consider us breeding with them bestiality.
There are those troubling elements. The soul issues, I think, are more speculative.
Yeah, that to me strikes me. Given what the admonitions are given in the Bible, it doesn't surprise me that this sort of stuff might have been going on. But I agree with you. I think the idea that somehow humans and Neanderthals could have actually produced an offspring in a way that gets incorporated into the human gene pool, that to me is more troubling. So, if we find out that at the end of the day, this is true, this has happened, do you see this as a defeater for Christianity?
I don't see it as a defeater for Christianity. I don't think it rises to the level of something that would violate or go against essential Christian doctrine. It's a strange thing. It raises issues that are out of the norm. But no, I don't think that it affects any absolute essential element.
But it's a fact that every child born today with ancestors from outside Africa has a little bit of Neanderthal inside their genome. They just haven't figured out a way to reconcile that yet.
Well, the way I kind of think through this as a biochemist now dabbling in theology is that, if you think of the soul being from a creationist view, where God is creating the soul in each embryo, you could argue that God recognized that one of those parents was actually a human being and honored that and created a soul in that human Neanderthal hybrid.
Well, he could argue a lot of things, but what he's saying is not scientific and it's not testable.
If you take the view that the soul is kind of inherited from the parents, you can make the argument, well, the image of God isn't really divisible. It's either there or not. And so that offspring could very well have a soul, even though one of the parents was a Neanderthal because one of the parents was human. So that's how I've kind of made sense of it. But I agree, it's really a very uncomfortable idea. But if this is where the science is forcing us, we've got to address it theologically and biblically.
Well, the science is telling us that we had a common ancestor with Neanderthals about 700,000 years ago, and while we were on our way to going in different directions, we still maintained limited interbreeding.
Well, and I think that to me is one of the aspects of Christianity that I find very engaging, is that there are things that I look at and it's like, ooh, really? But then you investigate and it's like Christianity has this theological depth and robustness to kind of deal with whatever the scientific challenges come up, and kind of in recognition that if God's the creator of the world, what we see in Scripture and what we see in creation are going to agree. So,
well, for some, the Bible seems pretty flexible, but for others, like young Earth creationists, Ken Ham and the like, not so much.
What are your thoughts on how do we wrestle with this, and how might we use this to engage the culture?
Well, I like what Fuzz says. I mean, I think we have to take truth wherever it is. If the data indicates that this happened, Christians need to be able to have a breadth of their worldview that can incorporate these kinds of things. And again, dealing with the soulish issue, even if you believe in traditionism, again, the idea that the soul comes from the parents, God could have worked miraculously in this particular event.
So did this God do this for just the first generation? Did he have to step in for the second and third generation? What if those hybrids mated back with the Neanderthal again? You see, you can invoke miracles anytime you want, but once again, this is not any kind of scientific testable model that they talked about.
But obviously, there are the moral issues of human beings relating one to another, not with some animal, but it could also be that the humans in this case were victims. So that's another element of this, I think.
Yeah.
He's basically calling Neanderthals animals and saying that Homo sapiens were their victims.
Well, it's interesting too that presumably some of the genes that were introduced into the human gene pool from Neanderthals actually helped humans to survive as we were migrating around the world, encountering new types of parasites that we never encountered before. There's a belief that some of our immunity actually is coming from the Neanderthal genome. And that reminds us that, that while what Scripture teaches, that while somebody may intend something for evil, God can use it for good. So even in this, you could see God redeeming this horrible act.
Old Earth creationists might get the age of the Earth and the universe right, but the stuff that they push about human evolution is no better than the crap that the young Earth creationists say.
This really is one of those areas where it's challenging to deal with. But what I find remarkable about the Bible is that, and Christianity, is that it has a robustness to not only deal with the splendor of humanity, but also with the depravity of humanity in a way that is coherent and compelling and equips us to engage others with the gospel.
So Neanderthals have been reduced to depravity. This guy doesn't look all that comfortable with it. Neither one of these guys looked very comfortable or confident in what they were saying at all. The fact is that Neanderthals were fully human, just a different type of human from us. They had thoughts and feelings. They might have been limited in some capacities. But to reduce them to the level of animals and suggest that interbreeding with them was depravity is just flat out wrong. As I said in the beginning, I bought the revised edition of Who Was Adam by Fazale, Rana, and Hugh. So in future videos, I'll be taking a look at what they say now about human origins and how it's changed from what they said 10 or 15 years ago.